In the 20th century, the United States stood as the most powerful nation on Earth. Its military unmatched, its technology unrivaled, its influence global. And yet, in a small Southeast Asian country called Vietnam, that power was challenged, tested, and ultimately defeated. How did a superpower with advanced weapons, air dominance, and global allies fail to win a war against a largely rural, developing nation? This is not just a story of battles and strategy. It is a story of ideology, miscalculation, resilience, and the limits of power. This is the story of the Vietnam War and how a superpower lost. To understand the Vietnam War, we must go back not to the 1960s, but decades earlier. Vietnam had been under colonial rule by France since the late 19th century. For years, the Vietnamese people resisted foreign control. One of the leading figures of this resistance was Ho Chi Minh, a nationalist and communist leader who sought independence for Vietnam. During World War II, Japan occupied Vietnam. When the war ended in 1945, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam independent. But France was not ready to give up its colony. This led to the First Indochina War, a brutal conflict between French forces and Vietnamese revolutionaries. In 1954, the French were defeated at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. After the war, Vietnam was temporarily divided. North Vietnam, communist, led by Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam, non-communist, supported by the West. Elections were supposed to reunify the country, but those elections never happened. The Vietnam War cannot be understood without the Cold War. After World War II, the world was divided between two superpowers: the United States, capitalist, democratic, the Soviet Union, communist. Both sides feared the spread of the other's ideology. This led to the Domino theory, the belief that if one country fell to communism, others would follow. For the United States, Vietnam was not just about Vietnam, it was about stopping communism in Asia. So when North Vietnam supported communist insurgents in the South, known as the Viet Cong, the US became increasingly involved. At first it was advisors, then funding, then weapons, and eventually war. In 1964, an event known as the Gulf of Tonkin incident changed everything. US ships reported being attacked by North Vietnamese forces. In response, the US Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving President Lyndon B. Johnson authority to expand military action. Soon after, American troops began arriving in Vietnam in large numbers. By 1968, over 500,000 US soldiers were deployed. The United States relied on superior firepower, advanced technology, and air dominance. But Vietnam was not a conventional war. There were no clear front lines, no defined enemy positions. Instead, it was a guerrilla war. The Viet Cong used ambush tactics, underground tunnels, and local knowledge of terrain. They blended into villages, making it difficult to distinguish fighters from civilians. The US military found itself fighting an invisible enemy. The jungles of Vietnam became one of the most challenging battlefields in modern history. American soldiers faced booby traps, sniper attacks, harsh climate, and psychological stress. The Viet Cong constructed vast tunnel networks used for movement, communication, and surprise attacks. To counter this, the US used napalm, Agent Orange, and heavy bombing campaigns. These tactics caused massive destruction, but they also had unintended consequences: civilian casualties, environmental damage, and growing resentment among the Vietnamese population. Instead of weakening the enemy, these actions sometimes strengthened their resolve. The Vietnam War was not only fought in Southeast Asia, it was also fought in the United States. For the first time in history, a war was broadcast directly into people's homes. Television showed graphic combat footage, injured soldiers, civilian suffering. Public opinion began to shift. Protests spread across the country. Students, activists, and even veterans began questioning the war. Many Americans asked, "Why are we here? What are we fighting for? Is victory even possible?" The war became deeply unpopular, and political pressure began to grow. In 1968, the war reached a turning point. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces launched the Tet Offensive, a coordinated series of attacks across South Vietnam. They struck cities, military bases, even the US Embassy in Saigon. Militarily, the US and South Vietnam eventually pushed back the attacks, but psychologically, the impact was enormous. The offensive showed that the enemy was far stronger than many had believed. Confidence in the war effort collapsed. Even some American leaders began to doubt whether victory was achievable. The United States had overwhelming military strength, but the Vietnam War exposed its limitations. Key challenges included fighting a guerrilla war with conventional tactics, underestimating the enemy's resilience, lack of clear objectives, difficulty gaining local support. North Vietnam, by contrast, had strong motivation, clear goals, and a willingness to endure heavy losses. For them, the war was about independence and reunification. For the United States, it became increasingly unclear what success looked like. In the early 1970s, the United States began withdrawing troops. A policy called Vietnamization aimed to transfer responsibility to South Vietnamese forces. In 1973, a peace agreement was signed. US troops left Vietnam, but the conflict did not end. 2 years later, in 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon. South Vietnam fell. The country was unified under communist rule. The Vietnam War was not lost in a single battle. It was lost through a combination of factors: misunderstanding the nature of the conflict, underestimating the opponent, losing public support at home, fighting a war without clear, achievable goals. It showed that power alone is not enough, that technology cannot replace strategy, and that in war, understanding the people, the land, and the purpose matters more than anything else. The Vietnam War remains one of history's most important lessons, a reminder that even the strongest nations can be defeated when they fight the wrong war.